So I decided to do this video a little different. Normally I have a lot of the animations and I'd have pictures and videos. And I'm going to continue to do that, as well as I'll be on camera as well too, in a pretty short while. But today I wanted to really have a long video on this particular topic because this is what you guys are really after. I mean, it's one thing to talk about all the different theories and the patching of follicles and the regrowth threshold and alpha and omega, and those things are nice too. But what you guys are really trying to figure out is how to keep your hair that you have, or how to reverse hair that's lost. And according to current science and our understandings is that once your scalp looks bald, once there is no hair there, then the follicle is dead. And I call that the myth of balding. And the two myths of balding is it's irreversible and it is inevitable. Today, I'm going to talk about this one particular subject that I know you guys really want to hear about. And it's going to be a plain video. I'm not going to have a bunch of stuff up there this time because it's going to be long and the editing process takes quite a long time, which is the reason why I can only produce 3 to 4 videos a month currently. But this video is how to reactivate dead follicles to regrow hair years later. And as I stated, there really is no such thing as a dead follicle. There are different stages of sleep that the follicle is under. So let me start with the basics. When you've heard the term dead follicle, what that means is a follicle that is stuck in a telogen state. And the telogen state is basically a coma state. That is a state that pretty much it goes like this. It goes anagen state, catagen state, and telogen. It's kind of like your sleep state, where alpha or the anagen state, I should say, would be you waking up, you're walking around, you're working, you're at school, etc., right? And the catagen state would be you getting on your night clothes, you probably brushing your teeth, yawning, getting the bed prepared, locking the doors, alarms, whatever you want to do in order to kind of get prepared. And the telogen state would be the state that you actually sleep for those 8 hours, hopefully. And then after the telogen state, you are supposed to wake back up to the anagen state. And the anagen state is daytime. And the catagen state is evening. And the telogen state is when you're asleep. Okay? But the thing about follicles is, depending on the environment or the climate or what's going on around it and in it, it tells you how long that telogen state is going to be. And I'll tell you why your follicles in your frontal, on the sides, or obviously on the crown as well too, seem to stay in a permanent state of telogen. Okay? So in order to reactivate these dead follicles, you want to replace the word dead with telogen or coma, because that is what it is. And here's the great thing about this dead or telogen state follicle. When it goes to sleep, it goes to sleep almost in a way that you would go to sleep or get into a coma, right? Someone gets in an accident or something bad happens, their body goes into a coma state in order to protect it. Just like when something happens and you get knocked out and your brain kind of shuts down in order to kind of protect it from that impact. It's the same exact thing with the telogen state. And what that says is, if you can pick up the follicle from where it is, it doesn't age. And I'll pretty much mention in the end of this video is how the follicles that are regrowing terminal hair now, none of them are gray, which is ironic. Okay. Now, When you think of, I call it the path, and the path is pretty much how to reverse your hair loss naturally, okay? It starts with the trigger. The trigger causes some sort of immune response, and hormonal imbalance comes shortly thereafter, which causes circulation, vasodilation issues, which then leads to the mechanical physical issues, okay? So let me say it in a different way that's more practical. The trigger is gluten. Gluten causes some sort of pathogen to escape your gut, gets in your bloodstream, eventually ends up in the scalp. The scalp becomes irritated because the biome of the scalp is thrown off. There's an immune response. There's acne. There is especially inflammation, and inflammation is the number one cause of follicles to have abortions, right? Hormonal imbalance happens because the body is attempting to patch or fix what's occurring. So DHT becomes the medicine that the body takes from testosterone and is trying to curb this inflammation problem like a steroid, which then leads to circulation vasodilation issues because, as we know, DHT seems to hold the mouth of the follicles, which causes starvation. And it does this in several different ways. Number one, it binds to the follicle, and it is taking the place of an actual T or testosterone that actually grows hair, right? But it's like a key that fits, but it can't turn all the way, right? I call DHT impotent. Now, this causes circulation problems because what happens is when you have inflammation, irritation, or infection, acute and or chronic or both, you will find that the body begins to produce plaque and cholesterol begins to pile up. And as we know, DHT and T is made from cholesterol. So you find that androgens along with cholesterol begins to fill up the scalp, especially the galea area and the galea wall. And now you have your vessels there, the arteries there, that are filled with plaque and cholesterol, and also the dermal layers in itself become hardened, and the soft tissue becomes hard tissue because it's almost like a burn. Therefore, you get this shiny, rubbery, hard look, which again leads to tension and mechanical physical issues. This is called the path. That's the path to balding that everyone on here who's listening has taken. Okay, it's just that you may go immune response, hormonal imbalance, circulation, vasodilation, mechanical physical, and your Norwood patterns are slower and or less impactful than your neighbor. But you're going to go through the same exact path as everyone else, okay? And speaking of that, the reason why the actual Hamilton-Norwood pattern exists is not because the hair falls out in that pattern. It is because the Hamilton-Norwood pattern is actually the human growth pattern. It's the way that the hair follicles grow naturally. It's made that way, just kind of like your finger has its fingerprint. The hair pattern grows that way. And if you want to kind of look at it, bring up some pictures of newborns, you'll see that they actually have various different levels of the Hamilton-Norwood pattern when they're babies, which tells you that it's about circulation. But what happens is in the Hamilton-Norwood pattern, you're actually watching yourself go backwards from the human growth pattern to the Hamilton-Norwood loss pattern, okay? So you're just really reversing what naturally happens in the womb. Thus, the hairs that I am growing right now seemingly are like more baby hairs. And I don't mean small hairs. Some of them are very long, but they are fine. They are curlier than the sides of my hair. And they remind me of the hair I had when I was probably 4 or 5. Do I remember that? Just pictures. Now, in order to regrow hair, you're going to look at the path, but you're going to kind of take it backwards. You're going to walk the pattern backwards, or the path backwards, just like the Hamilton-Norwood hair loss pattern is the human growth pattern that is backwards, just like the alpha scalp that is hardened, that is full of DHT and androgens, that is tense, that doesn't have the right feminization to it, doesn't have the right balance to it, but has infection, inflammation, and irritation on the surface or underneath the surface, and has vasodilation and circulation issues, right? And the omega will be the total opposite. It would be supple. It would be a lot of circulation, vasodilation, no problems with androgens. It's very balanced, and there will be no infection, irritation, or inflammation. Okay. Now, the path you're walking backwards for this specific reason. You regrow hair not when you add something to the environment of the scalp. Let me be very clear. You are not attempting to fix your scalp in the way that you're adding something to it. So if you find yourself adding minoxidil, or you find yourself adding grapeseed oil, you find yourself adding finasteride, or whatever you're adding to it, I can bet if you really look at this therapeutic that you're doing, is actually stopping or hindering something. Now, you would think that minoxidil is just causing vasodilation. What is it inhibiting? It's inhibiting the closing and the narrowing of the vessels in the follicle, the dermal papilla, the straw, and the vessels in the scalp. So while it seems to be doing something or giving your scalp something, what it's actually doing is inhibiting or stopping a process that causes hair loss. If you were to view hair loss as a symptom of these other things, mechanisms that happen, it makes total sense. Okay. Now, one of the things you really have to get is that the mechanical physical changes are the true causes of the follicle being in the coma-telligent state, seemingly permanently. Okay. So here's what you want to do. Now, let me say this. Many of you are going to start with the topical solutions, vasodilation, circulation. You're going to start with DHT inhibitors and perhaps some sort of nutrition, vitamins, internal, etc. Right? Okay, I get it. But let me give you this. It's going to work, but it is not going to be as effective as if you first dealt with the mechanical physical changes. And here's why. The extra skin layers happen on the scalp. You will not see them. So here's what I want you to do when you go in the mirror after this video. I want you to look at your forehead, because if you've been receding, only if you've been receding, right? Rather on the temples, or in the front, or on your crown, wherever you've been receding at, I want you to take a good look at that skin. And you tell me, does it look different than your facial skin? And more than likely, you will say no. You will say, my face skin looks just like my, the forehead skin. And the forehead skin, I used to have hair there, but it receded. See, that word receding seems as if this line of hair at the front is moving backwards. It is in lockstep, but it's not the actual hairline itself that's moving back. The follicles that used to be there have miniaturized, and they have miniaturized in a lockstep at the same exact time. I almost state that it looks like one would have a disease and it will pass this disease to those in proximity. And that's exactly what hair loss is. Hair loss itself is not a disease. However, in hair loss, your follicles absolutely cause a disease. They'll call it folliculitis, dermatitis. There's other names to it, but believe me, when I tell you this, you're healing the disease of the individual follicles, right? That's what you're really doing, okay? Now, you're probably looking at your forehead and you're saying, look, it looks the same as my forehead and my cheekbones. All that skin looks the same. Well, that should be your clue. How can it look the same? It shouldn't. See, your elbow skin looks different than your forearm. Your knee skin looks different than your thigh. Your palms look different than the opposite, right? The inside of your elbow looks different than your elbow, and so on. Matter of fact, your neck skin looks quite different than your forehead skin, different tension, different thicknesses, right? So how can your scalp, which is a different subset of skin, look the same as your forehead? It shouldn't. Right now, if you look at my forehead, you can actually tell the scalp layer and where the scalp starts. Now, if you get a person with an omega scalp, your brother, right? He doesn't have any male pattern balding, or your friend doesn't have any male pattern balding. They get a clipper on the lowest one and they buzz their hair, right? You're going to see that hairline. And then what you're going to say is, you know what? I'll tell them to shave it. So here's the thing. If they use a razor and bald it, then it'll be very, very, very hard to kind of see the difference. But give it 2 days. And if you give them 2 days, you're going to immediately see what the hairline is versus the forehead. Now, to you, because your forehead has receded, the question is, what am I looking at? You're looking at the fact that those follicles are in an intelligent state, but why does it look the same? Because here's the thing, and I'm skipping around a little bit. You don't see follicle pores. You don't see a change in texture. Why don't you see your follicle pores? Doesn't matter if the hair is not growing out of it. Fine. Okay, the hair miniaturized, it stopped growing. Good. Okay, we got that. But why don't you see follicle pores? The reason why you don't see those is because there's an overlayer of skin that starts right where your hairline is, and it blends in perfectly with your facial skin. And you will not be able to tell the differences between these two things until you begin to remove those scalp layers of skin. These scalp layers happen just as well as circulation and vasodilation issues at the same exact time, because those issues such as these scalp layers, they come from infection, inflammation, and irritation. The body seems to keep on putting on these loads of scalp layers because it's dealing with inflammation. And there is no peeling, and there is no hair that's pushing the skin through, or pushing through the skin, I should say, so that you get dandruffs and it kind of comes off, right? It becomes almost innate. Hibernation, right? And these skin layers become compacted. It doesn't look like it. So right now, you're going to look at your forehead and say, I know my hairline's moved back 2-3 inches. You're right, but you have no pores. When you begin to do scalp peels using different things like salicylic acid, I use a bunch of different herbs and stuff like that, you're going to see this skin peel off. And when you see this skin peel off, you're going to start seeing little pore holes right there on your hairline. When you do that, that will tell you why you couldn't use minoxidil and these topicals in order to grow hair. You never got to the root or the dermopapilia. Nothing you used on your forehead or on your hairline worked. And this is why they had this whole thing about minoxidil doesn't work on your hairline. That's false. Look, there is no difference between the hair on the hairline and the hair by the galea and the hair on the crown. It's no difference. There is no difference. When you had no hair loss, did you treat your hairline different than you treated your crown? Did you use more hair gel in one area only to style it, right? The hairs are the same exact way. They're the same exact function, same exact DNA. Is it thicker in certain areas? Yeah, that's the human growth pattern. But there is no difference between the hair in the front and the hair in the crown. Absolutely not. So why wouldn't minoxidil work? Why would it just work on the crown and not the forehead? You know why? Because it's not even getting to the dermopapilia. You got a bunch of different extra skin layers there. So I recommend attempting to study scalp peeling or skin peeling. That's what you want to do, okay? Now, another thing you're seeing there on your frontal is you're seeing what I call fibrotic tissue. You're seeing this. Now, when you look at fibrosis is not calcification. The calcification is kind of like pipes that have the calcium in it. Have you ever seen the street pipes that burst and you look inside, there's a bunch of sludge inside of it, things of this nature? That's calcium. That's calcification, okay? And lipids are pretty similar to that, because this kind of like cholesterol that's in your pores, right? But fibrosis, that's different. Fibrosis has a tendency to be hard tissue that once was soft tissue. So right where your forehead is or your hairline is, you will find that when you begin scalp peeling there, you're going to start, once you get those layers removed, you'll find some hardness in that area. And I truly believe that actually comes from the inflammation being acute and chronic over time, and it almost burns that skin to the point where it becomes compacted and hardened, and it cannot grow hair. This is like having a steak, right? And you burn it too much, you just keep cooking it well done, and now it's no longer steak, it's like rubbery. That's exactly what happens to the scalp with inflammation. Inflammation, in that word, is the word flame. And flame, that is hot, and hot burns, right? And things that burn become compressed and it changes the texture. That is what fibrosis is, okay? So what can help with fibrosis? Microinjury, derma roller, derma stamp. It's slow, but it works. And it works kind of in a scalp aeration. And what do I mean by aeration? That is kind of, if you guys do yard work, they poke the holes in the yard and it kind of lets out the steam. It kind of lets out the toxins in the grass. The water can get really deep into the soil, and it works a lot better. So the derma roller, derma stamp mostly is like aeration a bit. This also allows plaque and the cholesterol to slowly come up out of the scalp. I can tell you that's what's occurring. Of course, it creates micro injury that begins to heal the inflammation, infection, irritation that actually has caused this hair loss, okay? And these things over time with the scalp peeling would actually begin to change the texture of that environment. Now, a few other things you want to do when it comes to the mechanical physical is to decompress. Decompress is a way of releasing tension, but not just that. The scalp layers on your galea, the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis, those three things become squeezed together like if you were to get a pancake, 3 fluffy pancakes. Put them on a plate and get your hand and smash them down. That's kind of what happens in fibrosis. And also because the scalp is being, hair loss in itself is going from activity to inactivity. So as the dermal layers become less active, as the follicles become miniaturized and less of them are in an anagen state, the scalp almost compresses. What you don't use, you lose. So these scalp layers become more flattened together, and when you look at the tension and the plaque buildup, the epidermis, dermis, and the hypodermis becomes almost adhesed together or adhesive together. And the crazy part about it is when you begin to do scalp peeling, and I created something called scalp repair paste that has 16 different herbs in it that pretty much I use with the derma roller, and it burns the hell out my head. But when I'm done, I can almost peel the layers of this plaque and cholesterol and all these different things off my head with my hand. And I tell you guys, when you see the amount of plaque you actually have in your scalp that's caused the balding, you're going to really start worrying about what's really going on in your body. I can tell you that, okay? Now, this decompressing of these follicles, or I should say the scalp layers, what's really good is the hijama cupping. You can use a manual cupping. I use electric cupping, and it really pulls these scalp layers apart, and it causes the circulation to increase. It breaks up all the old blood that's in there. And it's just like if you were to do it on the back or the stomach, right? They say that if you used cupping on a part in your body and it's purple, then that's old blood. And I noticed when I first began cupping that my top of my head and spots would be purple. It's a hickey, pretty much, okay? It's just like a hickey. But now it's becoming more red. In the areas that is very red, the hair grows better. In the areas that you can cup, but it still doesn't produce a red layer at the top as if a hickey, that's where I'm having the most trouble growing hair. What does that tell you? In that area, and let me just skip to this part. When you have plaque, when you have compression, fibrosis in the area, and all these things together, that creates an environment where the follicle stays in a telogen state. When you use cupping, and one more thing I should say, kneading, like so for example, you get like a brush or some sort of tools that can kind of knead out the dermal layers. Gua sha, for example, the gua sha tools, the jade tools, you will find that what you're actually doing mechanically, you're almost forcing out the plaque in this area. You are reconditioning the dermal layers and kind of releasing them from each other. It's very hard to explain, okay? But when you take care of the mechanical, physical changes that have occurred, in your mind, gentlemen, you have to think this. I am not bald because of hair loss. I am not bald because of DHT. I am not bald because of genetics. I am bald in this area because more than likely I have extra skin layers, dermal plaque, cholesterol. I had and probably still have infection, inflammation, irritation. My layers have been decompressed and fibrosis is probably there. When you see hair in an area, but the hair is slowly miniaturizing, one of these things is getting worse. When you fix the mechanical, physical changes, what happens is you begin to develop vellus hairs. I don't mean just on follicles that were struggling. I meant the follicles were in a telogen state for over a decade. They began to get vellus hairs, and those vellus hairs are turning terminal. And that's only and all just because of the mechanical, physical changes. So if you go there, that's the first thing that I would do in order to begin to regrow hair. You will begin just by dealing with those issues there. You will begin to get your hair back. Now, the galea wall is the wall or circle around your scalp. Every man that goes bald, it usually goes bald. It usually becomes a problem within the galea, right? But that line around a man who's Norwood 7 shows you the galea wall. The galea wall is actually the tourniquet that is squeezing off, and it pretty much just keeps everything in a telogen state. That's why we can change our diet, we can do all these things, and we just stick in this semi-permanent state, okay? The galea wall is where you need to spend majority of your time doing derma rolling, derma stamping, and I'm gonna tell you this: the amount of plaque and cholesterol buildup within that line around the galea wall, you cannot believe how much plaque. You just won't believe it, okay? It's in there, but here's the kicker: that's hair on the sides, but right where that hair is, that's where some of the most plaque is. Because what I figured out is that plaque or that squeeze doesn't affect the sides as much because the sides is on those muscles, right? But it constricts or acts as a tourniquet for the galea that's at the top, and it is too weak to deal with that type of tension, right? So it pretty much squeezes all the circulation, and I highly suspect that the arteries going from the neck, the face, going up to the top. Just look at a diagram of the vessels, arteries inside of an actual, scalp. Matter of fact, I was looking at a lot of, real live, human bodies and stuff, looking at these arteries and things, right? And you'll find that right at the galea area, if that becomes constricted and restricted, squeezed, everything past that will die. Not fast, not to the point where, your scalp would just start dying for real, but there will not be enough circulation on the micro level for the follicles to produce hair. And that's exactly what's occurring. So along with all these different type of mechanical physical changes based off of this trigger, when that galea begins to become filled up with plaque, that's going to wrap. That's going to be the wrap, right? Now, so you want to deal with the galea a lot, right? And you're going to use the same exact tools on the top of the head as the sides, which is that circle around, okay? Now, mechanical physical is the primary, and then there are 3 secondaries, right? The circulation vasodilation issue. Now, once you begin to repair your scalp, once you begin to change it from the alpha type of climate to an omega type climate, mostly dealing with the mechanical physical changes and reversing that, you're going to find using minoxidil, using rosemary, pine needle, things of this nature that you're using in order to increase scalp vasodilation is much easier. It's night and day, right? Now, I want you guys to understand something. There are women and men who use minoxidil on their beards. Well, men for their beards, right? It grows. There are women who use it on their eyelashes and eyebrows. Men too. There are women who use it on their frontal hair because they were using braids or they were doing wigs, things of this nature that took out the baby hairs, right? So what makes you think that you don't supposed to use minoxidil for your frontal? You just can't because of the fibrosis, plaque, and things I mentioned. So when you get rid of those things, then it's going to work just like an omega scalp. You'll start growing hair on your forehead, okay? Now, and most of you weren't bald for 10 years, decades like myself. So it's going to be much easier, okay? Now, obviously, you're going to deal with the other secondary, which is DHT blockers. You're dealing with DHT blocking because it is causing, in my humble opinion, it is causing an overproduction of cholesterol, sebum, aka plaque. I know that cholesterol and plaque is not the same exact thing, but it's in sebum, it's not the same exact thing, but they all seem to do the same function. Sebum plugs the follicles with this like it looks like butter. Then the cholesterol seems to be a different version of it that deals with the arteries and the vessels. And then the plaque seems to be something that kind of becomes ingrained in the actual follicles themselves, or it could be calcification. But when I do say calcification and plaque and sebum, it's something that used to be liquidy and like the lipid draining system, and it becomes hardened, like almost if you had oil, and it becomes cold and it becomes kind of hard and buttery. It doesn't move. That's exactly what occurs, okay? Now, with that stated, so DHT blockers, in my humble opinion, is stopping that process from happening, and is also stopping DHT from hijacking the follicles, so that testosterone and estrogen, or a type of estrogen, can help the follicles grow, okay? DHT is impotent. It doesn't supposed to bind to the follicles in a sense. It's only a steroid, a medicine, and it's only there when there's a problem. So if you deal with the infection, inflammation, irritation, which I'll say next, then DHT should minimize anyway, right? But if you have entire body inflammation and the scalp is just showing that, remember, I think that the scalp is a upside down, inside out stomach, then literally, if you can deal with the inflammation internal, then it's going to help with the inflammation that is external, okay? Without inflammation, irritation, and infection, there is no need for DHT. Let me say that again. DHT is attracted to things that have went bad in your body and in your scalp, okay? Especially the scalp. Now, so DHT blockers, of course, you want to use those because you're kind of jumping into that circle to assist it. But if you deal with the problems that cause DHT to accumulate, then you won't need as much, right? Okay. And right now I'm using saw palmetto, things of this nature. I don't use finasteride or dutasteride, and I'm regrowing hair. That tells you that those things do work. These human ingenuity products do work, but they work for a specific reason, I'm telling you. Okay. Now, the most important secondary is to rid yourself of inflammation, infection, and irritation as stated. You have to do that because, for number one, an area that is inflamed causes the skin to overproduce skin cells, which means that it's going to block, it's either going to cover the follicle pore. And I shouldn't say great, but greatly knowing this is that when you have skin over the pore, something happens where it almost tells the follicle not to produce a vellus hair. I'm not saying it does, or I'm saying that the vellus hair is not strong enough to push through 4 and 5 layers of strong scalp skin that doesn't belong there. The vellus hairs seem to grow when that pore is open. Now, then after that, it takes it to get to the anagen state. But the point I'm making is that pore or follicle stays inactivated as long as you have a skin layer on top of it. But those skin layers come from inflammation, acute, chronic, infection, and irritation. So if you're seeing redness, if you're seeing splotches of like colors, like little splotches, things of this nature, if you're seeing a little bit of acne here and there, it's itching, there's this little burn underneath your skin, it feels kind of itchy sometimes, it feels like there's something going on, you just can't see it. That is the immune system fighting something that you don't see. And that is causing everything else to happen, DHT and hair loss, okay? The number one cause of a feminine follicle losing its baby, right, is inflammation. And I call hair loss, basically, it's nothing but the follicle losing a child. That's all it is, okay? So you have to understand that. And follicles are feminine. Okay, so remove in ways. Now, how do I remove the inflammation, infection, irritation? This is what you do. Treat your scalp like you have dermatitis and folliculitis. I know you're bald or you're receding, right? You don't think that you have any type of, no, man, I'm just losing hair. I need to focus on DHT inhibiting. I need to focus. No, bro, I'm telling you. Treat your scalp like it has dermatitis and folliculitis. If you do that, you're going to deal with the hidden causes of hair loss, which is underdermis, infection, irritation, and inflammation that the immune system is dealing with. All hair loss has been caused by an immune response in humans and in animals or mammals, okay? Androgenic alopecia is no different. It's just slower. It's just slower, okay? So when you deal with that, treat yourself like you have dermatitis, folliculitis, and that's medicated shampoos, that's using ointments, that's using things that have nothing to do with hair growth. And that's why you guys avoid it. You're like, I'm trying to grow hair. Actually, you're not. If you think you are still trying to grow hair, you are starting from the wrong space, man. I'm telling you. I'm not trying to be, aggressive or assertive. I just want you guys to understand you don't have a hair loss problem. If right now you have a mustache, if you have a beard, if you have hair in your armpits, if you have hair in your nether regions, if you have hair in your nose, ears like myself, right? If you have hair on the sides of your head and even some at the top, eyebrows, legs, if you have this hair and your body can produce it and your body has the nutrition to produce these things, you do not have a nutrition problem. You do not have a hair growth problem. You have a scalp problem. That's what's going on. Now, is the scalp problem a scalp disease? Because is it genetics or disease, right? Because we kind of call it both, and it doesn't make any sense. Male pattern balding is not a disease. No, it's a symptom. It's a symptom. What you're But what you want to do is treat the follicles like they actually have an STD. And I call it STD because they're dealing with DHT. They shouldn't be having intimacy with DHT, right? But it's there for a particular reason. Now, you want to deal with that. Treat it like you have a problem with your scalp, okay? Cholesterol, plaque, sebum, all those things of this nature are side effects of this inflammation, irritation, infection, okay? I talked about fibrosis and the cooking of the scalp follicles, making it these scalp layers makes it hard. Now, what's going to happen when you begin to deal with these problems? You're going to get vellus hairs. You can get vellus hairs in areas that were just it just looked like facial skin. You're going to see this little downy, kind of white hairs in the light, and you're gonna say, oh man, am I tripping? This and it's gonna be longer than a downy, because right now you have hair everywhere on your face, but it's very downy, right? That's why it's smooth. But you're gonna say that must be the hair. No, it's not. It's new. Okay. After that, it's a matter of taking that that vellus hair and giving it enough nutrition and massaging it enough that the body begins to treat it normally and it begins to go to the terminal stage. And that's going to be your biggest pro. The happiest time you're going to get when you do these things is you're going to see vellus hairs. But let me tell you something. When you get vellus hairs, it tells you that I'm 100% correct, because they were never there before, right? On the second end of it, the most saddest part you're going to get is though some of those vellus hairs will stay there for a year or two. And I'm still working out why certain ones do that. And I do not believe at all it's because they're just worse off than the ones next to it. Truly believe that it regrows in a reversal of the Hamilton-Owen pattern. And I'm trying to hijack how to speed that up. So time considerations is probably going to be something that you're not going to like. My phrase is scalp conditions must be met and maintained, while time considerations must be kept to secure gains. The time considerations is going to be what will make many of you say, I can't do this. You're going to see results. You're going to see it. You're going to say, oh man, and the hairs around your scalp are going to grow even more because of what you're doing, which is going to make your balding look worse, because the hairs that are not balding are going to get way better. That's exactly what my issue is, okay? But so you're going to see some pros. You're going to regrow hair. And if you do it long enough, yes, you can get to non-detectable. And if you use herbs, it's going to be slower, or natty, it's going to be slower. If you use natty and human ingenuity products and synthetics, it will be faster. I'm guessing it's going to be much faster, right? But I don't want to do that, right? For various different reasons. Most of it's research. Okay. And you're going to find that you begin to regrow your hair back, and it's going to grow back reversing. So whatever left you first is going to come back last. So if you recede it first and then the crown start thinning, the crown's going to come in first before the front line. Now, the frontal line will have hairs pop up in here and there, but it's not going to be aesthetic. Even right now, I must admit, I am not aesthetic. However, I grew enough hair that it is almost impossible. Now, you guys are going to duplicate this. What I'm simply saying is somebody had to do it. I did it. You guys are going to be able to replicate it, because I made a lot of mistakes along the way that slowed my time down, different things of this nature. But you can do it, okay? So I want to leave you with this in conclusion. You can regrow your hair, right? And you reactivate dead follicles by changing the environment that caused them to go quote unquote dead, which is an intelligent state. When you do that, it doesn't matter if they were been in intelligent state for a year or 10 years. It will take longer, obviously, if they've been in there for 10 years, because everything that the body gave them, muscles and different mechanisms, have miniaturized. See, your hair doesn't miniaturize. Your follicles miniaturize. And when they miniaturize, they actually can only produce smaller hairs. So if a person had an omega scalp and they found a way to increase the diameter or the size of the follicle, it would increase. You would have some huge hair. I mean, your hair would be all over the place, right? That's all you have to do. And if you want to get another clue into that, see how when people go through this hormonal therapy, women, transition to men, they've always had facial hair, but the minute they begin to get on these androgens, right, they begin to grow a mustache. What's happening? That follicle is reactivated and turned terminal via the androgens, okay? So that is how you reactivate your dead follicles. They're not dead, they're in an intelligent state. You all can do it, right? So hopefully this video has helped you. You guys can hit the like or subscribe button. Again, I know this is a plain video, much different than what I want to do, but I could not script this one because it was too much. It's too much to say. And of course, I'll follow with any comments you guys have. And I appreciate you guys. I took a little hiatus and got some personal things taken care of. But hopefully this video helps you all. And I'm going to produce some more and more videos, and it's going to be high quality content. Of course, I'll be doing whatever you guys think I should be doing and you don't really like about this channel. Believe me, I know that already, and it's going to fix it. All these are really prerequisite type of videos, and when it really gets hard and when it gets to the point where I could look more aesthetic, that's when things are going to flame out of control, more than likely. Okay, but I appreciate you all. If I could do anything for you, let me know in the comment section. But remember, if I can do it, you all can do it too. Let's get you back to the barber.